Alright guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to talk about this, a CZ P07 pistol chambered in 9mm. Now in order to talk about this, we are going to take a little bit of a dip back in time, but not much of one because this is not a terribly historic firearm as of yet. Now in 2009, CZ unveiled the P07 Duty, which was a lot like this pistol but missing a couple of features. Now, the P07 Duty was specifically supposed to be a from-the-ground up built polymer-framed hammer-fired pistol for CZ, and it would actually be its first polymer-framed hammer-fired pistol, designed to be so. There had been an adaptation of the CZ P07 at that point, but that was originally a steel-framed gun. This has only ever been a polymer-framed gun. Now, the Duty would come in until about 2012, at which point there would be some updates made to the CZ P07 to make it more akin to the CZ P09 that was about to be released. So the CZ P09 is actually the big brother of this particular pistol, and it was aimed specifically at kind of the duty/competition market with a 19-round 9mm flush fit magazine as opposed to the 15-round found in this handgun here. Now, both pistols were built around the Omega trigger system, which we'll talk about more once we get into the features on this particular handgun. Now, over the years, CZ has imported this in a variety of finishes and features as well. This particular one has metal sights with luminescent paint on them. They've had suppressor height sights paired with a threaded muzzle. There have been, in the Duty, there were at the very least some fiber optic sights included, and there's also been a variety of finishes, including OD green, as well as tan and battleship gray and all that kind of stuff. Whatever it is that you're after in colors, they have brought in at different times. Now, one of the biggest issues with CZ as a company overall is that they're not the best at getting product into the United States. They're kind of a niche firearms manufacturer, it seems, in the States, where I know a couple of gun shops locally that have CZs readily available and quite a few others, or the vast majority of the others, that do not. And what I have found is that CZ continually finds itself in some sort of catch-22, to where they come up with a fairly interesting and innovative offering on the market that challenges some that are already out and might be interesting to somebody who doesn't want to go with the kind of run-of-the-mill mainstream type product offerings. However, they can't necessarily easily find CZ products, so they can't find them for the price that they want to get CZ products for to be competitive enough with a lot of the other options that are already on the market. So they wind up going with those instead, and then CZ doesn't up its importation because it's not doing that well in sales, and then it just becomes this whole really vicious cycle. We see this with a couple of other products out on the market as well. So, sorry, I had to fix something on the phone just now. So that's kind of one of the things that we run into with this particular pistol, and that's why it's not necessarily booming in popularity overall. However, it is a fairly decent gun. So let's go ahead and start talking about some different features of this gun as well as my experience with it thus far. So as we can see right off the bat, we have a 3.8-inch barrel. We have these metal iron sights that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. These are 3-dot sights with luminescent paint. Now, it seems that a lot of your European manufacturers have been going with luminescent paint due to some sort of, I don't know, European environmental law, to where they're moving away from utilizing tritium sights. Now, you can get tritium night sights for this gun from Dawson Precision. However, it will not come with them standard. You're more than likely going to find the luminescent paint. Now, overall, when it comes to luminescent light on these, so what does that mean? Well, you charge them up with daylight, and then you go to bed, let's say you use this as a bedside gun, which I have in the past, your sights will be charged up and they will glow in the dark. However, as time passes, they will expire and you'll have to recharge them with a flashlight or something like that. And actually, a flashlight gives them fairly good light at that point for a little while. Now, I don't know exactly how long it takes for these to die out. What I do know is that I would go to bed with them lit up, and by the time I woke up in the morning, they were dead. So there's definitely somewhere, seeing as I get up pretty early in the morning, somewhere between 4:45 and 5:30, generally, there's definitely a span of time where I don't have night sights if something goes bump in the night. Is this a big deal? For me personally, kind of. So I have no children. So if something goes bump in the night, I'm completely content with barricading myself in my bedroom, covering the door with a long gun, and calling the police, and also observing the home through other security capabilities that I have built into the house now. However, that's if like the alarm goes off or something like that. If somehow I hear something go bump in the night and it's still my husbandly duty to go inspect it just in case somehow I forgot to turn on the alarm, whatever may have happened, somehow my security has been violated, I need to be able to maneuver through the house to check that out. And I generally wind up grabbing a bedside handgun in order to do that because I have a lot of tight spaces to kind of move around, and it's easier to do that with a handgun than it is with a full-sized rifle. So, recharging my lights, is it that big of a deal? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it gives away my position. Maybe it doesn't. You know, maybe it lets somebody know that now I'm on the hunt for them. I don't know. From a duty type use, I do not think that luminescent sights are that great of an idea, purely because, especially if you're working a night shift or if you're working a day shift and you wind up moving into a poorly lit area, your sights riding in a holster may not be properly charged. And you having to take that moment to properly charge them in order to be able to conduct your duty is not necessarily the best option overall, in my own opinion. I would prefer to have sights that are on so that I don't have to think about it. Now, you'll also note that we have forward cocking serrations on this pistol, right there. These were not on the original P07 duty, these right here. We also, of course, have our rear cocking serrations back here where they belong. You'll note that we have a very thin slide to work with here. This is pretty typical of CZ overall. However, there's still plenty to be able to grip in order to be able to function the slide overall. Now, what's actually very interesting about this setup is that you have internal slide rails, which is excellent as far as being able to have a lot of contact surface between the slide and the frame to be able to give you that more repeatable accuracy, as well as giving you that little bit lower profile on the slide overall. Now, ostensibly, this gives you a lower height over bore or lower bore access with this pistol, but you'll note that with this part of the frame here, it's really not that much smaller. And we'll do some comparison before we get done with this here today. Excuse me. Now, we have a chamber inspection window cut out into the chamber here so that we can observe whether or not we have a live round in the chamber. It is not tactile, it is entirely visual, so something to keep in mind there. We have this squared off exposed hammer, which on the original CZ P07, it would be a little more rounded, kind of like the traditional CZ hammer is. We do have a double action, single action trigger system here. We'll get into that more here in just a second. Over here, we have a railed Picatinny dust cover right there. Fairly good amount of space to be able to attach a light. We have this memory texturizing right here for when you're building your grip, making sure that you're getting that full, good thumbs forward grip. It's on both sides of the gun. We do have a single-sided slide, release, or catch, whatever it is that you want to call it. I don't particularly care one way or the other. I overhand rack, so I don't necessarily get involved in that conversation to begin with. We do have ambidextrous decocking levers located right here at the rear of the pistol, which can be replaced with the Omega trigger system. What is this Omega trigger system? The Omega trigger system replaces your decocker over to a thumb safety so that you can carry the pistol cocked and locked. Now, here's the very important thing about this here, guys. If you're going to attach that Omega system, if you're gonna go to the safety, I do recommend that you carry the gun cocked and locked instead of attempting to lower the hammer on a live round in the chamber. I do not recommend that. I would recommend that you go ahead, have the hammer cocked and locked so you get a single action first round pull, and then you still have double action if for some reason you need a second strike capability if the round doesn't go, or whatever. You do have a half cock position on the hammer, but I would still not recommend trying to pursue that with a live round in the chamber overall, just as a safety consideration. I personally prefer decockers because I don't mind having this still decocks to the half cock position, so it's not like I have a hammer resting against a firing pin, resting against a primer type situation, and then I'm completely fine with utilizing double action triggers. I shoot a lot of revolvers as it is, and I highly endorse the use of double action triggers as far as having a safe first round engagement. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. Now we do have a squared off, oversized trigger guard, excellent size for gloved hands. It is textured on the front of the trigger guard if you still grab the front of the trigger guard for shooting, which is a method. We have a decent undercut here, which allows us to get a high grip, along with this beaver tail at the rear of the pistol. Allows us to get a nice high grip. Now we do have our magazine release located at the edge of our trigger guard there, kind of the typical American variety instead of some of the more strange European options that are out there on the market. We do have texturing on the grip. However, I do have a minor complaint that we don't have texturing going up this high. Now for myself, I try to keep my pinky and bottom fingers here kind of loose on the grip. So I actually wound up gripping more here at the top of the gun. And it doesn't make any sense that that is where we would have a smooth surface instead of texturing that so it better grips my hand when I'm shooting. You would seem to think, and this is not the only handgun that does this, quite a few other manufacturers decided to forego putting any type of texturing right here. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, another way you can tell a CZ P07 duty from across the room is that it'll have more of a curvature to the trigger than what we see here. And it will not have interchangeable back straps, which this pistol does have. Now, we have a 15 round standard capacity magazine, and you'll see that we have a little bit of a cutout at the bottom here so that we can grab the magazine if for some reason we have a malfunction that's choking up the magazine. We have some surface area to grip to be able to yank this thing out. All right, guys. Well, that's the pistol. How does it shoot? I absolutely love shooting this handgun. This is absolutely fantastic. The double action trigger out of the box is incredibly smooth. Now, one thing that I will say about it is that I don't necessarily have a defined wall on the double action trigger, but it is smooth enough of a pull that as long as I'm kind of feeling my way through it and staging myself along it as I move, I don't see it as being a big issue as far as being able to keep good control of a double action trigger pull. Now, a lot of people don't like double action trigger pulls because if you're not well versed in being able to utilize one, you'll have a tendency for your first round to go low left for a right-handed shooter. But if you spend enough time working on that, you can really get good control of that double action trigger and keep those rounds stacked center stage. Now, another issue people have with double action triggers is after that initial double action pull, you then go over to a single action pull, and some people have a little bit of issue not anticipating yet another double action pull, and then they'll throw the second shot as well. It's a trainingism. It definitely means more time and rounds on the range as well as some dry fire, and I could see where that would be potentially prohibitive to somebody. However, this single action trigger is excellent. It's a very light pull. It's a very light breaking point. There's a very light wall right before it goes. And I do really appreciate it overall. For an out-of-the-box trigger, there are no updates done to this. You can get other trigger springs to put into this gun and make it much better of a trigger pull, more defined, perhaps a little bit lighter and all that kind of stuff. But what I really appreciate about this gun is it is really good out of the box. I don't feel any need to have to update that, whereas I could understand some people's gripes about Glock triggers. I don't necessarily share them because I'm also maybe not the person to talk to about triggers. I'm not a big trigger snob. I'm completely fine with having a workable trigger, even if it's of a gritty, heavy weight. As long as I can still pull off good center mass hits, I'm happy. I don't feel like it keeps me from being able to do that type of thing. Now, how do I feel about this gun overall? I actually really like this pistol, and I initially bought this gun to kind of be a replacement for a Glock 19. I already had a Glock 23, and I kept going back and forth on getting a Glock 19, and I decided that why get another of the compact Glocks when I could get something else that would fit a similar niche? So, and actually I went back and forth on that quite a while between the P07 and the P09, but a buddy of mine who worked at that gun shop pulled out the P09's 19-round magazine, placed it into the P07 grip, and I was like, and I'm sold. Even though I have no 19-round magazines, right now I only have the 15-rounders. That's getting into another issue that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But the question is, let's go ahead and satisfy this. Does this perform like a Glock 19? I happen to have the wife's Glock 19M here with me today. How do these two stack up? Now, keep in mind, I bought this right before the Gen 5s came out. So right off the bat, the Gen 5s have a pretty nice trigger overall. And as far as a recommendation type aspect, I do like that the striker fired trigger is consistent. I don't have to account for two different trigger pulls with this particular handgun like I do with this one. Now, from a weight type standpoint, this gun weighs in at 27 ounces, which puts it at 3 ounces heavier than this particular handgun. So there's that to consider. However, I don't think it's a weight prohibitive issue at this point. This isn't drastically heavier. It's still a polymer framed gun. All the weight is in the top of the gun, as opposed to being more evenly distributed in the 19, but it's not like it's going to kill you carrying this on, your hip all day or something like that. Now, as far as height over bore, a lot of people have a tendency to associate this design with having a fairly low bore axis. However, if we stack the top of these slides together, see if I can do this, I'll show this to you guys. We can see that the 19 actually has a little bit less bore axis, or a little lower bore axis overall. However, I will tell you that this gun still tracks fairly flat. I think that has a lot to do with the springs and stuff like that. I don't have any issue with keeping this gun on target, no more so than I do with this gun, at the very least. Now, one thing that I'll say for the Gen 5s in general is that we have this flared magazine well, which at first I didn't particularly like because it has a tendency to impact my grip a little bit. This gun has a barely flared magazine well, and I noticed that. And then in addition, with this cutout here at the bottom, this has a tendency to kind of pinch this pinky whenever I'm doing mag changes, so I try to keep my pinky out of the way whenever I'm doing that so I don't pinch my finger, and I've definitely done it before on the range. Now the question is, did I effectively replace a Glock 19? I actually feel like I did, personally. Now, as I mentioned, I have no issue with double action triggers. So if you do, this would not be a good replacement for you. Now, in addition to that, I actually really like this larger trigger guard because it's easier for a gloved hand to get in there. And that might be important to you if you live in a place that has all 4 seasons, but definitely has a winter or cold months where you have to wear heavier gloves, which you will not appreciate with a Glock 19, or any of the Glocks for that matter. As you can see there, once that trigger's cocked, it takes up a lot of space in the trigger guard. So I would not necessarily recommend that for a daily carry for winter type setups, which in a larger platform like this, for me, this is kind of a cold weather carry option. A Glock 19 would be as well. For the most part, I wind up carrying more small end of the compact setups like the Glock 43X whenever it comes to daily concealed carry. Now, would I recommend this to a new buyer? Conditionally. I would conditionally recommend this. One of my issues with the CZ P07 is that anytime that you go up against established manufacturers like Glock or Smith & Wesson, even XD for that matter, you wind up running into an issue with accessories. So this, if you don't like the sights, you can find replacement sights. There are not nearly as many options as there are for the Glock 19. You can find holsters and stuff like that. There are not that many options out there when it comes to holsters, especially once you go mounting a light on this particular setup. You start mounting lights on handguns and your holster options, even in the most popular of handguns, start to diminish. You take something that isn't as established and mount a light on it, you really start to run thin on holster options. Something to consider there. If you're wanting to go with RMR and stuff like that, CZ P07, as far as I know, has not been made standard with an RMR mount. You can get one machined in on the aftermarket, but you would have to send it off to get done. So my point being is that if you are, say, a first-time buyer, you're 21 years old and you're looking to get your first concealed carry handgun, you could get this and you would be very happy with it. You'd be very happy with how it shoots. You'd be very happy with how it performs. I've had no malfunctions, no issues. However, it might be a couple of weeks to a month before you have it completely outfitted to be able to concealed carry. So if you're looking for a CCW option ready to go instantaneously, this is probably not your choice. However, if you're doing a little bit of pre-research, you haven't turned 21 yet, you can't get the handgun yet, but you've got a bead on one and you want to go ahead and start working up the process of getting the stuff that you know you're going to want to add to it, you would at least be ahead on that aspect. It's just something that you're going to have to do instead of just being able to buy something like a Glock 19 or an MP9C or something like that and just going to whatever store you want and finding the holsters that you want. Like that's what happens. I've known plenty of people who wanted to buy specifically CZ products because they didn't want to go with the mainstream options. And then they were very frustrated with the lack of aftermarket support for their product choice. It's a factor. I'm not saying it's the only factor. I'm just saying that it's a very important factor to keep in mind. And I don't want you guys to get blindsided by it when you don't have to be. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers what all I have to say about this particular pistol. I hope you guys found this review interesting. It's been a while since I've done a handgun review, so I thought we'd change things up a little bit. But with that being the case, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day. Alright guys, this is Murph from the future for this particular video, who has a little bit of an update on the CZ P07 that we've been reviewing this whole time. Now, as I was shooting some additional footage to post with this video, I actually managed to break this gun. I was actually at the same time also shooting the footage for the LWRC M6ICA5 versus the IWI X95 Tavor, and I had this particular handgun on my battle belt in its holster, and I was rolling around on the ground and all that kind of stuff. When I got back up and I went over to shoot this handgun, I discovered that the decocker had broken, and actually I could drive this decocking lever well past where it's supposed to. As you can see right here, it's stopping me. It's not allowing me to push any further. That wasn't happening. And it was not dropping the hammer at that point. I did a little bit of research. It turns out that I'm not the only person to have ever had this issue. So what had happened was the bar that actually interacts with the decocking lever had broken. So, see if I can get this just right. Trying to do this backwards and while also looking in the camera. So this nub right here at the tip of my finger on this bar that has the decocking levers riding on it. You can see it tipping right there. That trips the trigger in such a manner that it lowers it safely and doesn't allow the round to discharge. That nub is integral to the decocking process. That broke off. Turns out that that's just like a pressed together piece and like glued in place or something along those lines. That completely broke off. It was gone. There was no remnant. I didn't even realize it was supposed to be there. And a lot of the disassembly videos that involve that piece for installing the safety are kind of difficult to make it out. So keep that in mind also if you're looking to install the safety on these pistols, trade out the decocker for the safety or vice versa. It's a little difficult to see what it is everyone's talking about on those videos. I did find one that was really good. If I find it again, I'll go ahead and annotate the link in the description so that you guys can check out that guy's video. He did a great job of making sure you can see all the pieces and parts and helped me realize that I was missing one. So I contacted CZ on the matter. They sent me a shipping label. I sent the gun in, and about 3 weeks later, I got it back, and up as of now, which I've put about another 150, 200 rounds through this pistol since then, I've had no issues. So it appears to have been resolved by the manufacturer. I appreciate that. I did wind up holding back releasing this video up until I got the gun back and got it out to the range and all that kind of stuff and made sure that it was working properly. But as we can see, it does exactly what it's supposed to do now. Does that shake my faith in CZ? A little bit, because I still don't like the construction of the part. However, they did a really good job of fixing it. And as long as it doesn't happen again, I don't see any need to get rid of this handgun. But that is something that I'm going to be paying attention to. And I'm not entirely sure if me rolling around on the ground had anything to do with this thing breaking. I honestly hope it didn't, because I need guns to be able to stand up to that type of thing. That's a completely reasonable expectation, to potentially have a gun get smashed between your body and the ground. Maybe you're going to have to do some pivoting and all that kind of stuff on it in order to be able to get in the position that you need to. And if this thing's going to break when I do that, then this would wind up being criteria for why this would not continue to serve with me long term. But for the moment, it's working just fine, and I will keep you guys updated if I have any additional issues. All right, now, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day. .92, yes!